Hello everyone, CM Freeze here, and today I'm going to be ranking and giving a grade for every single head coach hire this year. We've had 8 head coaches just get hired. The last one was announced, I think, 2 days ago, so it's had time to settle in for everybody. And I'm going to be giving my initial reactions, thoughts, rankings, and gradings for all 8 new head coach hires. Now, I'd like to start off this video by saying I actually don't think there was a single bad head coach hiring. So in last place here, I have Jerod Mayo, and I'm going to give him a C. I think you can maybe do a C minus, but I'm going to initially do a C. But so why is Jerod Mayo last, and why am I giving him a C? It is mainly because he has no experience at all as even a coordinator. Jerod Mayo was the linebacker coach for the Patriots for the last 5 years. You see that 5 years experience there? All 5 as a linebackers coach. Jerod Mayo has no experience at all as a coordinator, and he has no experience as a head coach. That's not to say he could be bad. I remember Mike Vrabel, he played for the Patriots, and I think he had little coaching experience when he took the job at Tennessee, and Mike Vrabel did a great job there. I am very surprised he has not picked up a job. I think Mike Vrabel will be getting a job next year for sure. I am actually really... There are some guys, I think Mike Vrabel would have been much better than Jerod Mayo. But I get why the Patriots did it. They wanted to promote someone from within, especially because Belichick's been their head coach for over 20 years. He's also been their GM for the last couple of years, too. It has been all Belichick. And it makes sense for them to promote from within, in this case, because they still need to figure things out. You know, what is life after Belichick? And they could have brought someone in, but they brought someone who knows Belichick's system and can help develop their team and expand away from Belichick a little bit, but still keeping some of that core Belichick functions. Not to mention, Jerod Mayo also played for the Patriots for a really long time and was a really good player. I think he was on a couple of Super Bowl winning rosters. So C for Jerod Mayo. It could be a C minus, but I'll be generous and give him a C. Next, with also a C, 7th ranking here, is Dan Quinn. I have seen a lot of people give a ton of hate on this Dan Quinn hiring, and I don't get it. Well, I do get it, but I think you're dumb. If I've seen a couple of rankings myself, and honestly, this is the main reason I kind of want to talk about this was because of the Dan Quinn hiring. I've been seeing people give him a C minus, a D plus, and I guess a C isn't too far off. I do get why some people hate on it, but you're hating on it way too much. Everyone's pointing on the game that just happened with Dan Quinn. He's like, oh, the Dallas Cowboys just allowed 48 points to the Packers. Their defense looked terrible. How are you going to hire Dan Quinn? And completely disregard the rest of the season. Dan Quinn's been the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys for 3 years now. Yeah, for 3 years now, he's been their defensive coordinator. And let me just pull up some stats here. Before Dan Quinn was the Cowboys defensive coordinator, they didn't make the playoffs. Then, first year as their defensive coordinator, he holds the San Francisco 49ers to just 23 points. A very high-powered offense and a team that could have made the Super Bowl that year. I forgot who San Francisco lost to. Which Super Bowl is this? They lost to the Eagles this year in 2022. This was the Rams. Yeah, was this Rams-Bengals? So they must have lost to the Rams, who obviously won the Super Bowl. So a good 49ers team, they held to 23 points. Literally last year, held Tom Brady to 14 points and held that same 49ers team to 19 points. These are 3 great defensive games that Dan Quinn has put together. Yes, terrible game against the Packers. And you cannot... That's on his resume. He just looked like shit. That Cowboys team just got dominated. But the previous 2 years, Dan Quinn has had a phenomenal defense. He's had a phenomenal defense all 3 years. And look at how he's been able to develop guys. Look at Micah Parsons. Look at all the corners that are coming out of Dallas. You have Diggs. This year you had Bland. Dallas is able to develop young players. Dan Quinn is able to develop young players, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't hate the signing as much. People look at this Packers game and that's all they're talking about right now because that's the talk of the town. That's what just happened. And yes, Dan Quinn and that defense looked like shit. And everyone's like, oh my God, why would Washington sign him? But look at the rest of his resume here. He looked great in the previous 2 years, not to mention he was the head coach with Atlanta. He took them to a Super Bowl. We don't need to talk about how that ended. And then the previous year, he took them to the divisional round, where they probably should have beaten the Eagles in that game, too. That's not on Dan Quinn's fault that Keanu Neal is a fucking idiot and can't catch a football. That's not on Dan Quinn's fault that, for some reason, the offense couldn't score on the goal line. So much shit happened in that Falcons game. That game fucking pisses me off. Fuck you, Keanu Neal. I'm still pissed about that. We would have won that game if Keanu Neal wasn't such a... Almost said something I can't say on YouTube. But screw Keanu Neal. I'm still pissed off about that. Probably the second most heartbreaking loss I've seen besides that Super Bowl game. I'd really have to think about it. Where the fuck's my Dan Quinn thing? Okay, there we go. So I understand why people don't like him. Like I said, that Super Bowl choke, those years in Atlanta, but he was with Atlanta for 5 years. 6 years, actually. First year went 8-8. Average for a first-year head coach, then took him to the Super Bowl next year, third-year playoffs, and then his fourth and fifth year, his team was riddled with injuries. I remember the year after the Falcons lost to the Eagles in the divisional round. Next year, very first game we played the Eagles, we had like 5 players get hurt that game. Keanu Neal got hurt. Deion Jones got hurt. We had a really good corner that got hurt too. Desmond Trufant got hurt. Our defense got fucking destroyed that year. And then Dan Quinn just could never really recover from that. But in 3 years with Dallas, he's put together a really good defense. So I think defensively, I'm not worried about Dan Quinn at all. The Washington Commanders have a couple of young players on defense. I think he can help develop. Offensively is why Dan Quinn's getting a C here. It was kind of Kyle Shanahan that really helped that offense out. And then once he left, that offense was never the same. And Matt Ryan was a veteran. It's not like Dan Quinn was developing him and Julio Jones. They were already developed. So defensively, I really like Dan Quinn here for the Commanders. Offensively, that's why he's getting a C here. My sixth next guy, who I'm going to be giving a C+, is Panthers' Dave Channels. So I was looking up articles for all these guys, and I can't help but laugh when I looked up Dave Channels, and this was one of the very first thing that came up. Addiction's a real thing. I shouldn't say I laughed. I'm sorry, Dave Channels. Addiction's a real thing. It's not a funny topic. But this is just going to be the article I'm going to put in the background for him. No reason. It's one of the top articles when you look up Dave Channels. But I'm going to get a C+ here. He's young. His entire career, I believe he was with the Seattle Seahawks. He was with Seattle for basically all of his career. He was their wide receivers coach from 2010 to 2017. And during that time, they had Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin, so he helped develop some really good wide receivers. He was on a Super Bowl winning team with the Seahawks. This year, he was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Bucks, and he looked really good. Now, the Bucks' offense statistically didn't do that good, but from where they were last year, he helped develop Baker Mayfield to one of his best careers that he's had so far. The run game is not that good, but the Bucks' offensive line isn't that good either. I don't know. This is just a C+ hiring for me. I think Dave Channels is young, and I think he can really help develop Bryce Young. He was with Russell Wilson for a really long time, and he just helped develop Baker this year. And he was able to get a lot of players involved. Obviously there was Mike Evans, but besides Mike Evans, he didn't really have much to work with, and he still helped Baker Mayfield get there. I think Chris Godwin, he can't stay healthy, man, to save his life. Chris Godwin, when he's on the field, he's good, but he just has some games where he's just not really there. Not real much to say about this. This is probably, I think, the definition of average. This is probably the most average head coach signing there is. Dan Quinn, and Jared Mayo, I would say, are just a little bit below average because they had some things not to like. Obviously, Jared Mayo, no experience at all. Dan Quinn has experience, has looked good, but then obviously the Super Bowl blunder and that 0-5 start with Atlanta, all the chokes that were under Dan Quinn. So I get it. And then Dave Channels, you don't really know what you're getting here. He's been on the offense for his entire career. I think he can really help out Bryce Young. I think they have some young wide receivers that they can help out with Bryce Young. I think he'll probably bring in some guys. They just need to figure out defense because obviously he has no defensive experience. At number 5, so we went Jared Mayo C, Dan Quinn C, Dave Chanel C+. Number 5 is Falcons Raheem Morris. In my original video, which you should go watch, I initially said I hated the Raheem Morris signing, and I think I gave that a C or a C-. I've thought about it a little more. I've seen what people have been saying, doing research on it, and I'm very torn between a B- and a C+ here. You could persuade me on either of them. I see cases for him being a C+ higher, and I see cases for him being a B- higher. There's no in between, so I really don't want to give him a B-, but it's either B- or C+. I'll talk about it and then I'll make my final decision here. So just to kind of recap what I said in my original video, is that this guy's been a loser. 4 seasons as a head coach. I guess I know one of them in 2020 was a half season, but he went 4-7, 4-12, 3-13, and then he had 1-10-6 year. And obviously, those 3 seasons that he had in Tampa Bay were over 10 years ago. And he's developed and grown since then. But just even when he was the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams, their defense wasn't good. Like, their defense, he had an average defense all 3 years. This year, Ryan Nielsen and the Falcons had a better defense than the Rams defense. And just think about that. We had a better defense than the Rams defense this year. The Falcons did. So I get why the Falcons hired him. I really do. And the more I'm talking about it, now I'm kind of getting ticked off again. So I'm gonna stay at C+. I'm staying at C+. Main reason C+. I can't go on a rant again. I have a video. Just go watch the video. I'm pissed at it still. But I'm going to give it a C+. I like the guys that Raheem Morris has brought in with him from the Rams, and I like how he's kept a lot of the coaches in Atlanta. And I'm giving him a C+, and he's here at 5 because I don't think he's going to be doing a lot of the play calling. In Atlanta, under Arthur Smith, we didn't have an offensive, or I guess we technically had an offensive coordinator, but Arthur Smith was the play caller. And then when we had Dan Quinn, he was our defensive coordinator, and he made the defensive play calls. So now we finally get a breath of fresh air where we actually have an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator, and then a head coach who's just being like, yeah, that sounds like a good play. I don't think Raheem Morris is actually going to be doing that much when it comes to play calling. He's going to be letting his guys do his own thing and just overseeing the show. And that I like because we haven't had that in forever. And now Raheem Morris is saying, hey, I'm going to trust my guys and I'm going to let them do their thing. Just go be you, do your thing. I'll step in if I need to. Don't make me step in. And I kind of like that mindset. Raheem Morris, I think he's going to let his guys play. He's going to have the best players on the field. You know, he's not going to not have Bijan Robinson get the ball or, you know, do a fucking wide receiver screen to Jonnu Smith every single play when you got Bijan. Falcons need to answer a couple questions. But yes, that's on the head coach, but like the players that, you know, that the GM decides to bring in, not really on him. So we'll see how Raheem Morris goes. I'm going to bump him up to a C+ here. He's my 5th ranked head coach. And coming in at 4 is I have no CNN, I don't give a fuck, is Brian Callahan, Bengals OC. I'm going to give this a B. So we had no B-. We had a two C's, two C pluses, and now we go straight to B for Brian Callahan. This is where I'm starting to get to the hires I really like. Those 4 hires I just said, I think were average. I was iffy on. These 4 hires I really like. Brian Callahan and the Cincinnati Bengals offense has looked phenomenal since Joe Burrow got there and Brian Callahan got there. Brian Callahan, and yes, he's had incredible talent, but he's maximized that talent. He's known what to do with it, and the offensive play calling has looked phenomenal at times. Falcons fans know, I remember 2 years ago, Joe Burrow just dropped 45 on our ass. He's unforgiving. He knows how to constantly apply pressure. You don't see the Cincinnati Bengals choking games offensively. He keeps pressure on. And in close games, he knows what to call to win games. Hell, when Joe Burrow left, look at how fucking good Jake Browning did under him. He made the offense easy for Jake Browning so that he can succeed. And with the Tennessee Titans, I think that, if I was the Titans, what I would do is I would give Will Levis the full season, give him a season to develop, kind of like what the Falcons did with Desmond Ridder this year. But at pick 7, I think the top 3 quarterbacks will be off the board. So if you're Tennessee, draft either another offensive weapon or an offensive lineman. I'm fine with either or. Draft Joe Alt, draft Malik Neighbors, draft Rome Odunze. Give him a phenomenal weapon. Go sign some guys in free agency. I think Brian Calhoun can make Will Levis's life as easy as possible and really help develop Will Levis. He's looked great as a offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, and I think this was one of the better free agent signings. Next, I'm going to give a B+ to Antonio Pierce for the Raiders. This is what they needed to do. This is what needed to happen. Antonio Pierce is a Raider. When you think about the Raiders, they are a tough team with a lot of swagger. Like, look at even this article here. They are a tough team. They have a personality. Think of Raider Nation. They're loud, they're physical, they're big, they're tough. John Gruden set that culture back in the day, and they've continued that culture. And Antonio Pierce, when he became their interim head coach, the Raiders just a different switch flipped. They love playing for him. They play physical. You look at all these guys like Max Crosby saying, hey, trade me if you don't give me Antonio Pierce as my head coach. Look at these top guys that will do anything to keep Pierce and want to play with him. Defensively, that Raiders defense looked so good under Antonio Pierce. Phenomenal under Antonio Pierce. They beat the Chiefs, man. That's great. The Raiders in the second half of the season looked phenomenal. I know they won their first game with Pierce. I think they went 50-50. This says right here they finished 5-4. They had a winning record under him. Antonio Pierce looked great. Offensively, he doesn't have any offensive issues. He was a linebacker for the Giants. Defense is where he's at. That offense under him, there was a game that went literally 0-3. And it's like his defense allowed only 3 points, but he couldn't get a single point on offense. So that's why this is only a B+, because offensively you have question marks. I just know that the Raiders brought in Cliff Kingsbury to be their OC, so we'll see how that goes. But I really like the Pierce signing. This is what they needed to do. He's a Raider. The Raiders looked great under him. They have moxie under him. He has experience with the team. That is huge, except for Raheem Morris. I don't want to hear fucking shit about it. I don't want to hear shit about it. Antonio Pierce was the head coach this year. Raheem Morris hasn't been on the team for the last 3 years. I don't want to hear shit. I love the Antonio Pierce signing. This is what the Raiders needed to do. At 2, with my first A-, I'm going to be giving that to Mike McDonald for the Seattle Seahawks. I love this hire. He's going to become the youngest head coach now in the NFL, only 36 years old, and he's actually never played. I was doing some research on him, and he went to college in Georgia, and while he was at college in Georgia, he was a high school coach, and then he graduated from college, and has just been a coach his entire career. He immediately went to being a coach, and he's been under John Harbaugh and the Ravens for literally almost his entire career. I think he had 1 year at Michigan where he studied under Jim Harbaugh. So he's been a Harbaugh prodigy his entire career, and the Harbaughs are some of the most winningest head coaches in NFL history. This guy's young, so he was able to get the experience from the Harbaughs, but he's so young that he now knows what new defenses are doing. And look at how good the Ravens defense has been the last 2 years under him. He's been phenomenal as a defensive coordinator. When he was with the Raiders, I think he was their DB coach. Ravens have always had really good DBs. Really love this hire. Like I said, he's super young too, so he can develop. He has been great on the defensive side of the ball. When you think of the Seahawks, you think of that Legion of Boom. Defense has been their culture, and I think he's able to bring what he's learned from the Harbaughs and from coaching big physical guys over at the Ravens and bring that over to Seattle and put some life back into that Seahawks defense because they have pieces. The Seahawks have Devin Witherspoon. They have Jamal Adams. Who's that one kid that Tariq Woolen? We'll see what happens with him. He looked like shit this year. That defensive line has pieces. I think Bobby Wagner will probably retire, but we'll see what happened there. I think defensively, he can really turn around that Seahawks defense and just bring a culture shock. And since he's young, he can connect with these young players too, better than someone that 52-year-old Dan Quinn. You know, he's able to connect better with players. Players love him. Great coaching schemes. He just held the Chiefs to 17 fucking points, dude. He held the Chiefs to 17 points, and they're 3-time Super Bowl. They've made it to the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. He just held the Chiefs 17 points. That's great. His offense, Baltimore's offense couldn't get it done. They should be in the Super Bowl, and this guy's a big reason why they should be in the Super Bowl. And obviously, with an A rating for me, I'm not going to give it an A+, but I'm going to give it an A, is Jim Harbaugh. I think everyone kind of knew this. What can I say? This might be one of the biggest head coach signings ever. Like, ever. Jim Harbaugh has made it to the Super Bowl before. I think he's had a winning record almost every single year. He was with the 49ers. There's maybe 1 year he didn't. It's phenomenal at Michigan. He's been developing young guys for all of his career. I mean, what do you want me to say about this Jim Harbaugh signing right now? We all knew it was an A. We all knew that it was the best that he could do. Justin Herbert, thank God, he's finally going to get some help and not going to have an idiot as his head coach. The running game is going to significantly improve. Jim Harbaugh has always emphasized offensive line and defensive line and the run game, which is going to help out Herbert. Herbert's not going to have to do everything every more. Jim Harbaugh is going to 100% bring in free agents. Guys are going to want to play for Jim Harbaugh. People love Jim Harbaugh. He just won the Natty this year. He's a phenomenal coach, one of the best head coach hirings we've seen in a very long time, and the Chargers are just ecstatic to get him. I'm ecstatic for the Chargers. I really hope that he can win with the Chargers. Not to mention, I think I saw a report that even said that he's going to try to get Saquon Barkley this year. Austin Eckler, your career as a Charger is done. But anyways, guys, so just to recap here, Jerod Mayo, C. Dan Quinn. See, you're going to see my mouse like I'm an idiot. I didn't want to put this in order because I didn't want to spoil it, but who gives a fuck, I guess. So yeah, Jerod Mayo, C, 7th. Dan Quinn, 7th, C. Jerod Mayo, 8th. Panthers coach Dave Chanel, who has some addictions, 6, C+. Falcons Raheem Morris, 5th, C+. Brian Calhoun, 4th, B. Antonio Pierce, 3rd, B+. Seahawks, 2nd, A-. Jim Harbaugh, A. That has been my head coach ranking. Please let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my rankings. I would love to hear feedback from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.